Chapter 1. Tranquility. Disclaimer. Only thing I own are my original characters and fruits. Everything else probably belongs to me in an alternate dimension. Author's note. Hey there. This is my first story ever, so bear with me because I am not an English major. Story starts off a bit slow, and there will be a hefty amount of angst. I hope the ones who read will enjoy. Update. Edited some things. Descent. Chapter 1. Tranquility. The dense amount of palm trees swayed gently in the steady breeze of the wind. The tropical island was as beautiful as ever, she reflected. Sitting on her porch, she thought to herself that it was a peaceful day. Clouds floated high into the sky. The temperature was perfect, the sun was beaming, and the chirping of the birds rang steadily through her ears. Yes, she decided. It was a peaceful day, too peaceful. No sooner did that thought leave her head did she faintly hear footsteps that were steadily getting louder, approaching her location. Accompanied by those footsteps was an even louder voice that excitedly cheered, "Mama Aya?" A tiny figure burst through the dense trees, charging her at full speed. Brown eyes amusedly watched in slow motion as the charging figure promptly tripped on their feet, lay there for 30 seconds, slowly picked themselves up, calmly brushed the dust off their legs, and burst into tears. The woman stretched her arms out, and, in a matter of seconds, the child crashed into her bosom, crying their eyes out at their own clumsiness. Strawberry blonde hair jostled as the woman shook her head in amusement. "This is why I tell you to slow down, my little Rose. You somehow manage to trip every time without fail. I would think you'd have learned by now," she chided in faux exasperation. Large tear-streaked eyes, shining a striking shade of purple, looked up at her and, with wobbling lips, managed to say, But Mama, I missed you." Her heart melted at the adorable sight, and she beckoned him to climb higher, which he gladly did. He carefully avoided her flat stomach so that he could nuzzle his face into her freckled cheek. It only took a few more seconds for his cries to settle down, and soon, a happy expression quickly overtook his features. Port Gas D. Rouge couldn't help but laugh at how quickly it took her son to get back to his cheerful disposition. Trying to control her laughter, after seeing the look of indignation on her son's face, Rouge asked, "Did you have fun today on your adventure, my little Rose?" Quickly forgetting his mother's transgressions, Port Gas D. Rosan grinned up at her, small sharp fangs gleaming in anticipation, and said, "You bet Mama. It was so fun." At just 4 years old, he was a skinny boy who stood at 3 feet 2 inches, 96 centimeters. His skin was a natural bronze hue, and he wore a plain black tee with red shorts and black sandals. Perhaps his most distinctive features were his shoulder-length brilliant crimson locks that spiked down in every direction of his head, and his blinding purple eyes that seemed to always shine in excitement. He was an adorable, wild ball of energy with an infectious sunny disposition, and Rouge loved him with all her heart. Rosan was practically buzzing with excitement at his mother's curiosity. "Oh, well, Mama, first As Rosan began listing off his mighty adventures, Rouge allowed herself to get a bit lost in her thoughts. Despite not being her actual son, the freckled woman didn't allow that to deter her and showered Rosan with all the love a mother could give a son. She had been taking an evening stroll one day when a noise of distress alerted her to another presence in the area. Thinking someone was in trouble, Rouge had quickly gone to the source of the noise and gasped in shock at what she saw. Wrapped firmly in a blue blanket inside of a basket, a wailing infant, who couldn't be more than a couple weeks old, rested there. Rouge looked around slightly and confirmed that it was only her and the child there. Had this poor baby been abandoned by its parents? How awful! Why would anyone do that to this poor infant? Who would leave such a young child out here alone? Rouge thought to herself, and, as if sensing that someone was there, the infant began to cry even louder. Crouching down to get a closer look inside the basket, Rouge's heart melted at the sight. A tuft of red adorned the top of their head, and they were covered in blue blankets. As they stared at Rouge, she couldn't help but be mesmerized at how bright and expressive their purple eyes were. The baby's eyes seemed to glow in the night light, and she found herself confused at the odd sight. She had never quite seen a child's eyes glowing, but there were much stranger things in this world, so she didn't allow herself to be bothered. The crying abated a bit as the baby caught sight of her. Rouge knelt closer and saw something scribbled on the blankets. She smoothed out the baby's blanket to get a better look at the writing. "Undersea Rosan," it read. Rouge's eyes widened as she saw his name. It couldn't be. The infant had the D initial? The baby's parent had thought to hide his surname, but not the D? Was it out of ignorance? It was a good thing she had found him first. It could have been disastrous if someone else managed to grab this baby. The baby had stopped crying by then to observe her and began giggling as she smoothed out their blankets, inadvertently tickling them in the process. It warmed her heart seeing how happy he looked, and Rouge couldn't help but let out a light laugh herself as she continued to play with the child. This continued for a few more minutes, before Rouge realized that it was not normal to be playing with an abandoned infant in the forest. He was placed safely in between a tree's branch, so it was clear that this was intentional. At least they put him in, as somewhat of, a safe position as one could be in the forest, she thought to herself. As she bit her lip in contemplation, Rouge double-checked again to make sure that this baby was truly left alone. "I can't imagine what someone would do if they knew this child was a D," the woman thought, grateful that she was the one to run into the boy. She couldn't, in good conscience, leave an infant who did not look older than 2 weeks alone. Who knows what they would do to him, especially considering if they happened to know the meaning behind his initial. The small amount of time spent with the child had already left her quite attached to him, and, seeing that he had no parents in sight, the decision was easy for Rouge. Mind made up, Rouge picked up the basket with the baby inside and began to walk back home. At the very least, if this baby has not been abandoned, I can watch over them until their guardian comes, she thought to herself, but doubt filled her mind that anyone would come back for them. Rouge wondered just who could abandon such an adorable child and what the story behind it was. As she glanced down to look at the child, a fierce sense of protectiveness began to overtake her. No child deserved to grow up fending for themselves in such a cruel world. If she hadn't found the child, who knows just how long they would have remained out here? They would almost surely die. She would raise this child herself if she had to. "Don't you worry, my little Rose. Everything will be all right. You're safe with me now," Rouge said to the child as she made her way back home. The woman smiled to herself as the baby gurgled happily. She had always wanted a child. That had been 4 years ago, and, true to her words, Rouge had raised little Portgas de Rosan as if he were her actual son. It had not taken her long to identify that the baby was in fact a boy, and he was very needy for attention. She had plenty of sleepless nights due to the boy missing her presence and letting her know he did, quite loudly in fact. Rouge had adjusted to the lifestyle of raising a newborn very quickly though, and not once did she regret her decision. Rosan was a little ray of sunshine that shone wherever he went. He didn't have many friends because there were not much children on Batarilla, and that thought made Rouge shudder protectively. Due to reports of the Pirate King, Joel D. Roger, saying he acted like a man in love on Batarilla, the world government had seen it fit to kill any newborn infant in hopes of ending the legendary man's bloodline before they could fully grow into a problem like him. Rouge absent-mindedly rubbed her belly as she remembered that time. Luckily, due to the fact that he was a budding toddler, older than what the reports suggested with a unique appearance that looked nothing like Roger, Rosan had managed to evade the world government's eyes and he was, thankfully, still alive. Rouge was abruptly snapped out of her musings as Rosan kept regaling her with his adventure, and she caught something. "Wait, what did he just say?" "Rosan, sweetie? Mama is sorry, but can you repeat what you just said?" Rouge asked. She could swear he had said something about a fruit, and she felt a nervous feeling pooling in her stomach at the realization of what it could be. Rosan's eyes scrunched cutely in confusion at her request, before his eyes lit up and he exclaimed, "Ah, I found a really pretty rock, but I lost it when I was running back home." He looked forlornly behind him at where the rock probably was, and it desperately looked like he wanted to get back up to go find it again. It was a really awesome rock. Rouge let out an amused sigh and she said, "No, not that, my little Rose. What did you say after? About a fruit, I think." It finally dawned on Rosan what she was talking about, and the sheer disgust that quickly took over his features would have made her laugh if she wasn't already filled with such dread. The redhead. sensing something was wrong but not letting it deter him, said, "Oh, Mama, it was so bad. So, listen to this. After I lost my special rock, right? I got really sad and tried looking for it everywhere." At this, Rosan's eyes went downcast as he continued, "But I couldn't find it anywhere. I searched for so long, but I never saw it. When I finally gave up, I saw a really weird fruit in a bush." Rouge felt a pit in her stomach as he continued with his story. Oh no. Flashback. Rosan was not having a good day. In fact, this might have been the worst day he ever had. The 4-year-old might have been exaggerating a little bit, but he felt justified in feeling like this. After all, he had found the coolest rock ever, and he was so excited to show it off to Mama, but somehow, he had managed to lose the rock. Him. Rosan. Losing something. The very thought was inconceivable to the boy who had never lost anything. He was perfectly responsible. You could even ask Mama. Asking Rouge in question would lead to the woman vehemently disagreeing with that notion. After searching for hours, 5 minutes in reality, Rosan had given up and began to sulk back home. Pushing through the dense shrubbery, the 4-year-old paused as something caught his eye. Kneeling down to get a closer look, his eyes sparkled in curiosity as he saw the strangest-looking thing. Lying on the shrubbery was a cubical white fruit covered with thick swirls. A weird letter M formed the stem of the fruit that made Rosan think of the word mayonnaise. It was a big word, and he was a smart boy. As he picked up the odd fruit, the redhead observed that it would just barely fit perfectly into an adult's hand. That, of course, meant that it was too large for Rosan's, much tinier, palms, so he had to use both hands to hold it. Wow, so cool. I wonder what type of fruit this is. Rosan regarded it in wonder. It looks so good, he exclaimed aloud. Allowing his curiosity to get the better of him, the boy held the fruit closer to his face to get a whiff of it, and after deeming it suitable, took a large bite without any hesitation. The boy couldn't resist. He loved fruits. They were much better than vegetables. He really hoped it didn't taste like a pear, though. Rosan hated pears. As he swallowed the bite, Rosan's face immediately shifted into one of regret, as the most rancid taste ever filled his mouth. The boy was not exaggerating this time when he declared this the most disgusting thing he had ever had the displeasure of eating. Definitely not a pear. Pears were at least edible. Pears only made him cry when Mama was keeping the apples away from him. Rosan spat out the remains of the fruit and clawed at his tongue in hopes of getting the taste out of his mouth, but it was all for naught. Tears pricked the corner of his eyes at how horrible it tasted. The boy finally understood what his Mama had meant when she said not to just stick anything in his mouth. If this was the result, then he'd listen to everything she had to say. "Ugh, you not good. So not good," Rosan moaned pitifully. What had he been thinking? Oh, right. He hadn't been thinking at all. After taking a few seconds, 10 minutes, to compose himself, Rosan stood back up from the hunched-over position he hadn't known he'd took, glanced at the fruit he bit into, and summarily tossed it deep into the bushes surrounding the forest he was in. "Man, that tasted so bad. I can still feel it in my mouth," he said miserably. "My apologies, Rosan. Would you like the taste to go away?" An androgynous voice suddenly asked. Yes, he immediately responded before remembering his manners and adding a, "Please, it tastes so bad," and soon after, the taste from his mouth vanished. Rosan marveled as the taste disappeared. Wow, it's just gone. That's so cool. And then realization hit him. Looking around rapidly, the boy asked, "Wait a minute. Who are you?" After a moment, the voice he heard spoke up politely. "Hello, I am Modification." It introduced itself. "I am the aforementioned nasty fruit you have just eaten. If you have any questions, you are free to ask." Rosan blinked in confusion before adopting a look of horror. Wait a sec. Did I eat you? Oh no, I'm so sorry. Please don't tell Mama, I might get in trouble. Hysterically, Rosan began to think about what his mother would do to him once she realized he ate someone. Oh God, how could he even begin to explain that he ate a person? "I didn't know people could transform into fruits," the little child exclaimed in terror. "No wonder you tasted so gross. Humans are nasty." As Rosan's panic delved into a mumbled mess, Modification felt a sweat drop forming and thought to theirself, just what exactly did I get myself into? So you're something called a mod no me? Yes. What I ate was a devil fruit, and that's why you're in my head? Indeed. And now I have powers? That is correct. After bombarding Modification with questions, Rosan finally took the time to process what he had heard from the devil fruit. Modification was pleasantly surprised that he had understood everything they had said. The devil fruit had thought they would need to explain a lot more, but after only one explanation, the boy was nodding along in understanding. Modification had to give him credit where it was due. He was far smarter than he looked. Far smarter. Rosan's eyes shined, and he started shaking in excitement. Wow, that's so cool. What can I do with it? Can I make unlimited ice cream? Can I turn into a dragon and breathe fire? That would be so awesome. Oh, maybe I can make myself big so Mama doesn't say I'm too young to do stuff anymore. His eyes went wide and Rosan had to cut himself off as he said, I'll wait. I gotta get back home and tell Mama all about this. Completely forgetting that Modification was in his head, he said, Sorry Mod-chan, let's talk later.
I gotta go.
And he ran off without a second thought. Sweat drop fully forming, Modification decided that he was not as smart as he looked. No, in fact, he was probably the opposite. Present. Rouge couldn't possibly understand how someone as bright as her little Rose could be so stupid at the same time. She sat there with increasing amounts of horror as Rosan retold his tale of how he had eaten a devil fruit of all things. Had he seriously, without any hesitation, eaten an unknown fruit? Without even thinking of the consequences? Just because it looked good? Had Rouge known that her son had no sense of self-preservation, she would have been much more assertive on telling him what to be careful of. The freckled woman hadn't felt the need to tell Rosan about devil fruits just yet. He was only 4 years old after all, and it was rare to see one of the elusive fruits in the blue sea. She had been saving the warning for what they did, when he was older and could decide on his own if he wanted one without being blinded by his fantasies. Seems like that option was thrown out of the window now. Something he said, though, had managed to catch her attention. Rosan, you said your devil fruit is a she? Rosan snapped out of his expert storytelling mode and nodded his head enthusiastically. She sounds like one, so I think so. Her name is Modification. The redhead was grinning widely at his successful pronunciation of his newly acquired devil fruit's name. She's so cool, Mama. The fruit was nasty, and then she said, Do you want the bad taste to go away? So then I was like, yeah, and then it was like fwoosh, and then the taste was gone. Rouge felt that familiar fond exasperation well up inside of her as her son rambled on and on. Oh, my little Rose, you're so hopeless, she sighed softly, a smile adorning her features. Rosan's eyes furrowed and his tiny nose scrunched up as he said, What? The genuine confusion on his adorable face would have made anyone squeal at the sight, and Rouge was no exception as she hugged Rosan close to her. The boy flailed in her grip, but she ignored it. Rouge didn't know much about devil fruits, but she had never heard someone refer to them so specifically. Roger had told her about the fruits, and he never mentioned it. She filed that information away for later. She wasn't nearly as upset as she should probably be, but Rosan didn't have to know that. The boy hadn't been seriously injured, and at worst, she would just have to be careful bathing him now. In fact, depending on the devil fruit eaten, Rosan would have an extra layer of protection. That didn't mean he wasn't in trouble, though. The fruit could have been poisonous for all he knew, and he ate it regardless. No, he was definitely going to be punished for being so reckless. Mama Ea, you're crushing me. Rosan whined, and Rouge just hugged him harder. Consider this punishment for doing something so dumb, Rosan. Rosan froze as he realized his mother was using his actual name, and it finally dawned on him that maybe what he did wasn't the smartest thing ever. Rouge laughed as he wisely kept his mouth shut and allowed her to hug him. He really is hopeless, Rouge mused as she continued to laugh. Despite seemingly laughing at him and her general cheerfulness, Rouge was in fact not happy with what he had done, and her wrath had been swift. Being on punishment sucks, Rosan decided. It sucked so much that he would never, ever do anything bad again. Nope, he was a changed boy now. He definitely wasn't changing his ways of life because his sweet mama terrified him. Rosan shuddered at the look in her eyes when he had tried to argue against the idea of being punished. One look from his mother had completely shut down all arguments, and Rosan had, rather meekly, said, "All right, Mama." His mama was scary when she wanted to be. Really scary. The redhead idly bobbed his head in time with his mother's humming, and he glanced up at her from where he was seated. The pregnant woman, who expertly ignored the afternoon heat, was preparing dinner for the both of them with a small smile on her face. Rosan quickly closed the book he had been reading, a fairy tale about dragons, and ran up to his mother, excitement clear on his features. "Mama, let me help, please." The boy excitedly called her as he practically jumped in spot. He loved spending time with his mama. She was his most favorite person in the world after all. Rouge looked down and contemplated his request. The freckled woman was a little suspicious that he was trying to get out of trouble, but she immediately dismissed that thought. Rosan was far too honest to ever scheme against her. She had taught him the importance of not lying to her, and the boy had quickly taken it to heart. He was innately honest as well, so that helped tremendously. With that thought out the way, Rouge smiled down at him, all traces of her being upset gone due to his genuineness, and said, "Of course, my little Rose. Can you do this for me?" As mother and son worked on dinner in peaceful silence, Rosan allowed himself to get lulled by the peace of it all. He really did love his mama more than anything in the world, and he cherished moments like this. The redhead didn't have many friends because there weren't that much kids on the island around his age. The few children on the island were rather put off by the way he acted too. Rosan shrugged. Their loss, he was awesome. He did have one friend his age named Shizuka, but she was weird. She always mentioned weird things such as getting married and being together, but Rosan didn't know what that stuff was. When he asked his mother, she let out an uncharacteristically hearty laugh and explained it to him in a way that his childish mind could understand. The look of horror he had shot her had made her laugh even harder. Rosan wanted no part of that. He was only 4 for crying out loud. It didn't really matter, though. Shizuka hadn't spoken to him for a while. He was completely fine with it, but he had been a little bummed out at first. She was the only kid he liked, though that did remind him. "Mama," he called, looking over at the strawberry blonde woman. Rouge raised a brow at Rosan, beckoning for him to continue. Rosan's eyes gleamed in anticipation, but before he spoke, he remembered that what he was saying was supposed to be a secret, and he was good at keeping those. With that knowledge at the forefront, the redhead lowered his voice to a considerable degree and asked, "When will I get to meet Ace?" Causing Rouge's eyes to widen. "The seagull guys have been disappearing, and you said that's why we can't meet him yet." He finished in excitement. Rouge pondered his question. She had told Rosan a simplified version about her pregnancy and how the Marines didn't want Ace and to be born. Her son caught on quickly that the world government was bad news and made sure to avoid them whenever he could. Truthfully, the redhead was right. The WG had progressively slowed down their rather frequent trips to Batarilla. Maybe she could finally just allow the child to be born. The freckled woman quickly banished that thought. No, as long as there was a chance they were here, she could. No would not allow her baby to be killed. She couldn't bear the thought of losing her child. "Soon, my little Rose," Rouge assured him gently, rubbing his soft spikes in the process. "Don't worry about me, I'm fine," she finished, hoping it would placate him, but she knew it wouldn't be enough. Rosan had an innate talent at reading people, and it was a skill that he abused, particularly on her, with glee. She watched, with a frown on her pretty face, as his eyes went downcast at the news and his lips began wobbling. Was he really that upset that she wouldn't be giving birth yet? No, there had to be another reason for it. "Rosan? What's wrong? Why are you so upset?" Rouge asked, and she knelt towards her oldest child. Rosan glared up at his mother, and she slightly reeled in surprise. "Why do you keep lying to me? I never lie to you because you'd be mad, so why shouldn't I be mad?" "Oh dear." Rouge looked away in guilt at his truthful words. She had really done it now, and it didn't look like her son was finished. Rosan, through shaky breaths, said, "Why you keep saying you're fine but you're not? I know you can't be when you're in so much pain at night." The sheer frustration painted clearly across his face made it clear that this had been bothering him for a while. Rouge froze as an overwhelming guilt overcame her. Had he noticed that? Of course he noticed, she chided herself. Rosan could be very astute when it came to a person he cared about. Her attempts to hide the agony that came with prolonging her pregnancy had no doubt been noticed by him. If the look in his eyes meant anything, then it was from the start. The strawberry blonde didn't want Rosan to know how bad it affected her, so she tried to mask the pain as a way of not worrying him. Masking it had only made him that much more aware of the issue, though. Rosan stared expectantly at her, practically demanding an explanation with his expression alone, and the pregnant woman couldn't help the resigned expression that appeared on her face. Rouge felt a wave of exhaustion hit her as tears began to form. She was just so tired. The freckled woman wanted nothing more than to give birth to her child, but how could she in the circumstances that she was currently in? Small arms wrapped tightly around her, and a watery smile formed as she gratefully hugged her son back. She looked down and felt utterly overwhelmed by how understanding Rosan's, similarly, tear-streaked gaze was. Despite how selfish she had been for not noticing how much pain her son was in, he still cared more about her own well-being than how mad he currently was for being kept in the dark. She didn't deserve his kindness at all, and that thought removed any doubt in her mind. Seeing the pain it caused him, and how caring he was despite that, it was only right she confided in her fears to him. It was the least he deserved. Steeling herself, Rouge shakily said, "I'm so scared, Rosan. I want nothing more than to have this child. I want to raise them, shower them in the same motherly love that I've showered you with, but I can't, Rosan. Not yet." Her breath hitched as the tears began to pour, and the 4-year-old hugged her tighter as she continued. "The world government will stop at nothing to have this baby killed, Rosan. My baby. They've been here for 2 years killing any newborn they can get their hand on." Rosan just listened in shocked silence, and Rouge took that as her chance to keep speaking. "Roger has been dead for so long already," she said forlornly, and she let out a choked sob at the thought of the man she fell in love with. Rosan had long since joined her in crying, and the two found solace in each other. Despite this, Rouge had already committed to telling her son everything, and she couldn't stop now. "I miss him so much, Rose, but I have to be strong for you and for our unborn child. Roger, I can't, no, I won't let our child die, Rosan. It won't happen. I refuse to let it happen." Rouge began hyperventilating just at the thought that something bad could happen to her child. Her child didn't deserve to be killed before they had even had a chance to live. No one deserved to die for the sins of their parent. The thought was enough to send her into a panicked frenzy. 2 hands clapped firmly onto her freckled cheeks. She had closed her eyes in the panic, and as she opened them, she saw a tear-streaked gaze filled with nothing but concern and understanding. "Mama, it's okay. I know it's hard, but if we do it together, it will be much better." Rosan reassured her, and she slowly but surely calmed down at how genuine he sounded. "I hate seeing you so sad. It makes me really sad. Then we're both sad. Then we'll probably cry a lot, but then I'm a big boy and I'm not posed to cry in." Rouge couldn't help it, and she let out a delighted laugh as her son rambled. She grabbed Rosan and began to nuzzle him, much to his displeasure. Handily ignoring his protests, Rouge only hugged him tighter. There were moments when Rosan seemed so much older than his age, and he showed such maturity, and then he would instantly revert back into his childish ways that filled her with so much joy. She was truly blessed to have found such a sweet little boy. Wiping her tears away, Rouge affectionately said, "Oh, my little Rose, you're absolutely right." Gently rubbing a spot on his hair that always turned him into putty, she asked, "Just what would I do without you?" Rosan snuggled deep into her and cockily replied, "Nothin', Mama, 'cause I'm the best." The freckled woman laughed in fond exasperation and said, "Of course, Rosan, of course." Mother and son stayed there for what felt like hours in the comfort of each other, until Rosan's stomach let out an embarrassingly loud gurgle. Blushing slightly at his mother's amused expression, Rosan tried to defend himself by saying, "Don't laugh at me, Mama. I'm hungry." His indignation only got worse, as her bell-like laughter got louder. "I'm sorry, my little Rose." Rouge didn't sound apologetic whatsoever, and Rosan puffed out his cheeks. "Let's finish dinner so we can eat, okay?" she told her precious son, who forgot his outrage at the prospect of food. Nodding his head furiously, Rosan replied, "I'll help so we can make it 500 times faster," and wiggled out of her grip. She cooed at the adorable sight. They both stood up in preparation to continue making food. The duo were in high spirits, despite the sadness they felt earlier. Rosan sobered up quickly and looked over at his mama to ask her a question. "Hey, Mama," he nearly whispered, and at her questioning glance, he continued, "Do you promise that after all this, the pain will go away and the three of us can be together?" Rouge smiled down at Rosan and replied earnestly, "I promise, my little Rose." Character sheet. Portgas de Rosan. Summary. Found and raised by Portgas de Rouge as a newborn, Rosan is a young boy full of boundless amounts of energy. Not much is known about his origins, but he has the D initial in his name. At only 4 years old, he is equipped with a larger-than-life personality and has more curiosity than what is probably good for him. Empathetic and observant, the boy is smarter than he looks.
Devil fruit, mod nomi, modification fruit.
Type, paramecia. Description, turns Rosan into a computer man. With this devil fruit, Rosan is allowed to modify whatever he sees fit. What's interesting is that this devil fruit seems to have a voice that Rosan has affectionately began to call Madchan. The nature of this fruit is unknown. Appearance, tan, nearly bronze skin. Height, 3 feet 2 inches, 96 centimeters. Hair, spiky shoulder-length red hair that's soft to touch. Eyes, 2 bright, shining purple eyes that seem to glow. Outfit, a simple black tee with red shorts and black sandals. Likes, rouge, Madchan, getting stronger, adventuring, sweets. He loves candy, meat and fruits. Strawberries and mangoes are his favorite. Dislikes, lizards, they make his skin crawl. World government, zombies. He doesn't care that they aren't real, they creep him out. The taste of a devil fruit and anything nasty. Author's note. Hi again. Hope you enjoyed Chapter 1 and my character Rosan. I already have a few chapters done, so the wait shouldn't take long. Something to note. If you're interested in knowing, Rosan will eventually become a Straw Hat. That's far away though, so enjoy learning about him in the meantime. Here's the title for the next chapter. Bye for now. Chapter 2. Despair. Disclaimer. Only thing I own are my original characters and fruits. Everything else probably belongs to me in an alternate dimension, I hope. Author's note. Hi again. Smiley face. Here's Chapter 2 of Descent, because I wanted to post it quickly. Hope you enjoy. Descent. Chapter 2. Despair. Rosan loved the freedom that being outside granted him. He loved the wind that brushed against his face, the noise of the wildlife, the palm trees, and the sunny weather. Rosan loved everything about Badarilla, except for the lizards. Rosan really didn't like lizards. Let's not get into that. It had been 1 week since the redhead had confronted his mother, since he had begged her to not exclude him from her life of pain. Patting himself on the back on how perfectly and maturely he handled that, Rosan was confident the scolding he had given his mother had solved most of their issues. After their talk, Rouge had a few instances when the pain of pregnancy was too much to deal with, and when that happened, Rosan would be right there. The boy took to soothing her and rubbing her back to ensure that his mother understood that she wasn't alone. It seemed to help because the pain would quickly abate soon after. Neither realized that Rosan was subconsciously using modification to make the pain go away. Rouge had an inkling, but she was just glad that the pain was gone. The red-headed boy clearly didn't know much about his devil fruit, if he didn't realize what he was doing, but it seemed to adhere to his wishes in some ways. That brings us to our current moment. Rosan was sitting cross-legged in the same clearing that he had found and ate his devil fruit. He had been wanting to speak to modification again and practice what he could do, but Mama had been strict with her punishment this time. He was rather spoiled, and the redhead didn't want to risk making her genuinely upset. The 4-year-old shuddered at the thought. For someone so sweet, Mama was really scary. Rouge had decided, after 1 week, that Rosan had been adequately punished. The strawberry blonde had very clearly warned Rosan about what would happen if he decided to do something so dumb again, and her son nodded rapidly in agreement. Rosan couldn't help but shiver as he saw the look on her face. Underneath his mama's smile was a terrifying demon that new devil fruit user swore he would not bring out. The 4-year-old refused to be the idiot that suffered her ire. Though it was hard to believe, Rosan was in fact not stupid whatsoever. Darn, he was getting off track. He tended to do that a lot, didn't he? It wasn't his fault. Everything was just so interesting. There was always something else grabbing his attention, and once his attention got grabbed, he jumped to it like. Rosan smacked his cheeks with both hands in order to stop himself from doing it again, and actually began to focus. Once he focused on something, nothing could stop him. Now, he needed to speak to Madchan before something stopped him. Not that anything could. How am I supposed to get Madchan to speak to me again? He mused. Maybe she was sleeping? He wouldn't want to wake her up in that case, because if someone woke him up from his sleep, he'd go crazy. Unless it was Mama, of course. I do not require sleep, a monotone voice spoke, and Rosan yelped as he jumped and hit his head on a branch. Rubbing his head, Rosan whined in pain and said, "Can you warn me before you do that, please? I got scared." "Why, you nearly scared me there," he hastily corrected himself. He suddenly stopped, and a look of confusion came across his face. He didn't say that out loud, so how did she? "Hey, are you some type of wizard? How did you know that I wanted to talk to you?" Rosan asked. Modification explained swiftly and told him, "I'm a voice inside of your head, so it stands to reason that I can read your mind." Rosan nodded his head at her explanation without much issue. It made sense, so he wouldn't argue. "Wait," he suddenly exclaimed. If she could hear his thoughts then, "Why didn't you speak to me at all until now, Madchan?" The boy asked in childish fury. He had been avoiding speaking out loud to avoid getting in trouble with Mama, but if he could speak to her in his mind, then he'd have nothing to worry about. Modification, for their part, was surprised. They took a bit longer to reply and asked, "You wanted to speak to me?" Without hesitation, Rosan said, "Well, duh, we're friends." "Don't be so dumb, Madchan." As he spoke to the voice in his head, Rosan realized that he made a very important oversight, and the boy said, rather loudly, Wait, Madcha. I mean Mod. I never asked if you were a boy or a girl." The redhead moaned at how he forgot something as simple as that. "I'm sorry, I heard your voice and thought you were a girl, so I called you Madchan this whole time. Please tell me you aren't a boy. I'd feel so bad." The boy finished, and he held his head in his palm. Modification, for their part, was utterly baffled at this boy named Rosan. He wanted to speak to it, called them friends, asked for its gender. Modification did not have a gender. Such trivialities had never mattered to the fruit. Yet, they seemed to matter to this boy. Just who was this child? He made absolutely no sense to the devil fruit. It showed, because the fruit was delayed in the answer that it gave. Rosan waited patiently, full of remorse. The boy was getting more and more upset because the silence seemingly confirmed his mistakes. He was actually really torn up about this. Modification, not wanting to see him upset any longer, made a decision in that moment. "I apologize for taking so long to respond. To answer your question, pertaining my gender, I am in fact a girl. There's no need to be upset. You were right." She placated him, and wasn't that just strange? The now-identified woman had no gender beforehand. Yet she had gone out of her way to make sure this strange boy was no longer upset with himself. Well, guess she was a girl now. Rosan brightened up immediately at that. "Really? Awesome. I knew it. People sometimes think I'm a girl too, so I'm glad I didn't be dumb like them." He babbled excitedly, and Madchan felt something stir at that. "Huh, how odd. May I ask you a question, Rosan?" Rosan sighed, and Maud assumed he was about to deny her request. Imagine her surprise when the boy said, "Madchan," in a scolding tone. "Don't be so dumb, dummy. Of course you can ask." Maud was surprised by his response, but Rosan wasn't finished. "And stop that. You use too much big words I don't know. We're friends, so you don't have to speak to me like that, you know." Modification could not believe what she was hearing right now. She was getting reprimanded by a boy who probably couldn't even count to 100. He totally could. It would have been funny If not for the fact that she actually felt properly scolded, how had he managed to make her feel bad? What was this boy? Was it because he had called her a friend? Rosan, you called me your friend. What do you mean by that? Maud asked softly. Rosan blinked in confusion, and his eyes widened before morphing into guilt. Oh, I'm sorry, he apologized glumly. I was so happy to get a new friend, but I didn't think about the fact that you may not want to be my friend, the redhead said in clear distress. One of the few chances he had to make a friend, and he already ruined it. Great job, Rosan. This boy must be protected at all costs, Maud decided right then and there. He was far too cute for his own good, and seeing him so upset over her question had her rushing to reassure him. I'd love to be your friend, Rosan. The boy startled a bit before beaming in pure joy at her, and it made Maud want to smile too. I just wanted to know why you wanted to be friends with me? You haven't known me for long, so why? She was genuinely curious as to why he was so eager. As Rosan heard her speak, his face split into a megawatt smile. His eyes practically glowed, and the sharp fangs of his teeth gleamed to match his excitement. Barely composing himself, Rosan eventually said, Well, you said we're gonna be together now, until I die, right? Well, I'm never gonna die, so we're gonna be together forever. Maud-chan, we might as well be friends. It was as simple as that, but Rosan said it so earnestly and so matter-of-factly that there was no doubt he meant it. Maud was prepared to speak, but she realized Rosan wasn't done speaking. She watched as his eyes went downcast, and instantly, the devil fruit got worried for the boy she was quickly growing fond of. Oh no, she was already whipped. Sometimes it gets really lonely. He started, and this was the quietest she heard him speak yet. I don't really have any friends, he admitted depressingly. There's only one person near my age, and she doesn't even look at me when we talk. I have Mama, but I don't want to bother her because she's busy with her stuff. Rosan's eyes got a bit foggy as he continued. I don't have anyone to play with, so I come to the forest and just do whatever I want. But even that can't distract me all the time. Maud felt increasingly worse as Rosan continued spilling his heart out to her, and she felt her own heart pang in sympathy. This was clearly eating the boy up inside, and seeing as he likely had no friend to vent to, she wouldn't speak until he was done. As his friend, she would gladly let him get this off his chest. True to her observations, Rosan continued unhindered. You sounded so surprised when I wanted to speak to you. I think Maud-chan is lonely like me, so I was thinking we could just be each other's friends. He tried to sound excited, but it did little to mask the desperation in his tone. It tore at her newly discovered heartstrings to see the boy she had so quickly grown attached to, so distressed. Since we share bodies, it'll be hard to hide stuff from each other, so we might as well get comfortable with each other, or it could get really bad. The best way to do that is to be friendly with each other, so we might as well be friends. Rosan kept rambling on reasons why they should be friends, and it honestly hurt to see how much he craved attention. Maud felt something unfamiliar surging through her as he tried to convince her on why it was a good idea to be his friend. It was clear that this boy was unbearably lonely sometimes. She felt a flash of surprise and respect for the boy, acknowledging that he could easily get attention from his mother, but refused to just for the sake of her being at even a little more peace. It was as incredible as it was worrying to realize that this boy was only 4 years old, and it flared instincts in Maud that she didn't know she had. It only took a moment for her to recognize this steadily increasing feeling as a strong sense of overprotectiveness, and the devil fruit wasn't as against it as she thought she would be. No, in fact, she welcomed this feeling wholeheartedly. Rosan was a caring child who just wanted the best for those he liked. In his eyes, even someone like her who, for all intents and purposes, was an intruder in his body. She was just an opportunity for him to finally make a friend he no doubt longed for. As the feelings inside started developing, Maud slowly began to find her own resolution. She had never quite met someone like Rosan, and he intrigued her to a degree the devil fruit had never felt. His cheerful demeanor and unwarranted confidence was quite endearing to her, and she wished to see him grow up. This was the first time her user had been someone so young, and she felt an unsettling feeling stir inside her at the thought of Rosan meeting the same fate as the wielders before him. That feeling was so strong that she made absolutely sure that fate wouldn't befall him. The resolution that was building inside of her only strengthened, and Maud made up her mind right then and there. She would help young Rosan in any way that she could with all the knowledge she had amassed and ensure his safety, because he was the first person who didn't want to use her for their own selfish gain. It felt nice to be shown such affection, and so she decided to return the feeling in the only way she knew how. It was the least she could do for living freely inside of him without his permission. Rosan had gone silent, awaiting her response in barely concealed nervousness. She smiled fondly at how much the redhead anticipated her answer. She appreciated how considerate he was and decided to stop his suffering before he jumped to conclusions. Something told her the boy was very close to doing just that. Rosan. The child perked up as he heard her call him, and he listened intently, eagerly awaiting her response. I'm flattered that you even asked. As long as you are alive, you can always rely on me to be there for you, Maud said as sincerely as possible. Rosan was one of a kind, and the first person to extend a hand to her. She would be his closest companion if she had to be. Stunned, Rosan listened with wide eyes before breaking out into one of the largest grins she had seen yet, and she had seen a lot. His little sharp fangs were glistening, and Rosan wiped the lingering tears away. The 4-year-old boy began to cheer in pure elation at what he heard, and Maud felt flattered that she was capable of eliciting such a reaction out of him. He was genuinely overjoyed that she wanted to be friends, and it filled her with an unexplainable warmth. Another part felt a slight amount of sadness that the redhead was so desperate for companionship in the first place. Rosan deserves all the friends in the world, Maud thought to herself as she took in his adorable glee with fondness. It was their loss if they didn't want to be around the ray of sunshine. By now, the boy had jumped up from his crisscross position in favor of launching himself around the clearing. A little red missile shot around the entire forest, yelling his joy to the world. It was incredibly infectious to witness, and she was in no rush to stop him. Maud really was whipped already. She wanted to protect everything about this boy. It took 5 minutes for Rosan to settle down. The little boy sat, brimming with excitement, and Maud smiled at it all. The devil fruit had her doubts before, but seeing his reaction had wiped all of it away. She would do her absolute best to keep this boy safe. She had no regrets, which is why she decided to tell the boy something extremely important right then and there. Rosan, there is something I have to tell you about that's incredibly urgent. So, you're super important, a lot of people want you, and they'll try and hurt me to get you, huh? Rosan rubbed his chin, like how the adults did, as he contemplated what Maud-chan had just told him. Yes, that's about right, Maud-chan replied, and Rosan nodded at her confirmation. After he had eventually settled down, Maud-chan had told him she had something important to tell him, and so he listened intently to what she had to say. A bit of what she had said was confusing, but Rosan had gotten the gist of it. Maud-chan wasn't just a devil fruit. She was a highly prized one that a lot of people would kill to have. The seagull guys especially seemed to really like her and frequently got their hands on her. She had told him that they would, without hesitation, take him and turn him into a weapon if they were aware that he had her, so he needed to be careful. Sucks for them. Maud-chan was his now, not theirs, and it would stay that way for as long as he saw fit. Rosan hummed in thought as he finished digesting the information. He didn't want to be used by other people for their own gains. Getting captured was one of the last things the redhead wanted. The boy wanted to be free to make any and all decisions for himself, and he would be darned if the seagull men took that away from him. Above all else, Rosan wanted to do as he pleased, and he absolutely refused to let himself be shackled. Okay, Maud-chan, I believe you. What should we do? And not that I don't already have a plan, Rosan asked her. The boy was trying to put on a serious front, but he was completely failing due to how adorable he was. Maud couldn't muster up the courage to tell him such a thing, though. The devil fruit, for her part, was surprised at the absolute trust Rosan displayed in her. You believe me? She asked in slight shock. Many would doubt me due to the negative light I am painting the world government in. Was he simply being naive? She would have to help stamp that out as quickly as possible for his own sake, if he was. It would do no good if someone else used the boy's good nature for their own gain. To Maud's surprise, Rosan's visage turned uncharacteristically dark as a scowl appeared on his face. I don't like the seagull men, he began with a surprising amount of venom in his tone. They made Mama hurt because they won't leave, and I won't forgive them for that. Maud honestly didn't know that cheerful Rosan was capable of holding such a grudge. I believe you, Maud-chan. Everyone says the Seagull men are good people, but good people wouldn't kill someone who hasn't even been born yet, Rosan declared simply, and that was that. As far as he was concerned, the Marines had long since solidified themselves as his enemy anyways, and Maud was just giving him another reason to be wary of them. How dare they just do whatever they wanted? They would pay. But not yet, because Rosan wasn't strong yet. But soon, he'd be the absolute strongest. He'd be so strong, no one would even think to mess with his loved ones. Rosan felt his resolve strengthening, and he gained a fire in his eyes. Previously, Rosan didn't have a set goal. The boy was content to live with his mother, just enjoying his life with her and his unborn sibling, who he knew was going to be a boy. Now, though, he had something to work for, and he'd put his 100% in working towards it. Rosan would become the strongest. He didn't care about ifs or buts. The boy would reach the top of the mountain and deal with anything that threatened his loved ones. That was a promise. Maud, being a part of him, felt all of this, and she was awed at the pure conviction the boy radiated. His belief that he would become the strongest was simple and straight to the point. There was absolutely no room for doubt, and, despite the little combat experience he had now, she believed him wholeheartedly. She felt proud at the absolute confidence he emitted. Some would call it arrogance, but she knew better. Rosan was aware that it wouldn't be easy, and he was willing to put in the effort to reach his goal. The devil fruit would help in any way she could. He had asked her what she wanted to do, and, with his conviction, she felt more assured that this was the right course of action. First, I suggest using my abilities in moderation. Due to the nature of modification, it's very simple to disguise it as another devil fruit, and that's what I'd like you to do. Only tell those who you have absolute trust in my name. Rosan nodded approvingly at her request. It made sense. Telling the whole world he had Maud-chan would definitely be a bad idea until he was strong enough to defend himself. Second, if you would allow, I'd like to personally modify you a bit. Only if you agree, of course. She hastily added, not wanting to rush into things. Since you've consumed my fruit, you've already gone through some natural changes. Your body and mind were already quite impressive, but they've only been upgraded now that you have me. I'd like to add a bit more quality of life, however, to help you as much as possible. Quality of life? Like what? Eyes sparkling with curiosity and interest, Rosan was utterly fascinated by what she was talking about. Everything she was saying was really interesting and ego-boosting. His body and mind were already impressive? Of course it was. He was Rosan. He definitely wasn't blushing at the compliments Maud-chan had thrown at him. Nope, not at all. Mostly simple things that will enhance your body. For instance, you'd have full control of your body, and, with my assistance, we can properly regulate it of dangers. It also comes with the benefit of having a mindscape, which Rosan quickly interrupted, though reluctantly, sorry Maud-chan, but what's a mindscape? It sounds cool, but I never heard of one. Maud nodded at what he said. It wasn't a surprise, not much bothered learning what a mindscape was because having one was nearly impossible. Your mindscape, simply put, is a mental representation of you. How you feel, your character, likes, etc. Through your mindscape, you will be able to regulate your body, speak with me, and even train a little bit. You can only train techniques and mentally, however. Physically is not an option, and you would still need proper rest. You're a growing boy after all. Rosan nodded at the information as he processed all she said before a spark lit up in his eyes. Wait. That means I'll get to see you. Hell, I mean heck yeah. I wonder how you look. Are you tall? What color is your hair? You must be so pretty. We can get to know each other better like this. What are you waiting for, Maud-chan? Let's make the mindscape. Quick. Rosan was practically vibrating with excitement at the revelation he had come to. Maud was truly baffled. All the benefits that came with having a mindscape and the revelation that had sold Rosan was the fact that he'd be able to see her. She didn't even have a gender before the boy had assumed she was a woman, and she only agreed to it for the sake of not wanting to hurt his feelings. Now he wanted to meet her face to face? Honestly, what a demanding child. She could already tell how much of a handful he would be. Sighing in exasperation, The devil fruit said, I'm glad you're so receptive to the idea, Rosan. In theory, we can see each other face to face, and since you're looking so forward to it, I'll get started on it right away. After a moment's pause, she added, also, I must confess, I don't have an appearance. Is there anything in particular you prefer? Beaming, the child bluntly said, Nope, I got nothing. She sweat dropped at his honest answer. It pained her to admit it, but she wasn't even surprised at his response. The devil fruit had already gotten used to the boy's quirkiness and had expected an answer like that. His antics were quickly becoming endearing to her, and already they filled her with fondness. It was actually quite astonishing. Only one day of speaking to him, and she had gotten so comfortable with the boy so quickly that he had changed her entire character. Rosan was quite the terrifying child in his own way. She had no doubt that in the future, he'd be an absolute force to be reckoned with. Maud was looking forward to it. In that case, would you have a problem if I used you as the basis of my appearance? She asked hesitantly. Rosan, without even thinking about it, easily replied, Sure, that would be so cool. You can be like my big sister. It'll be so awesome. The redhead felt Maud's smile and returned it brightly, as she said, Thank you, Rosan. I'm truly honored. In that case, it will take about a week for me to finish the mindscape. Feeling a teasing feeling well up inside of her, she smiled and said, You should probably start heading home now. I doubt your mother would appreciate you being out this late. With wide, fearful eyes, Rosan noted that it was indeed getting very late and that yes, his mother would definitely not appreciate that. He quickly scrambled to rush home, and all the while, Maud-chan giggled quietly at him. Rosan changed his mind. Maud-chan was mean, and he definitely was gonna give her a piece of his mind after he evaded his mother's wrath. Maud kept laughing at the boy's misfortune. If she could continue to mess with Rosan like this, she could quickly see the beauty of their friendship. Rouge shivered slightly as a cool breeze brushed against her. Winter was swiftly approaching, and not even Batarilla was exempt from the effects. She idly tightened the blanket surrounding both her and Rosan as she leisurely sipped on some coffee. Her little Rose hummed in delight as he snuggled deeper into her body, intently focused on the book he was reading. It honestly amazed her that someone as hyperactive as Rosan could actually sit down and read a book on his own accord. Reading was one of the few things that could get her son to sit and focus, which always lessened her worry for him. Best of all, he actually liked reading. The freckled woman didn't have to force him to do the task, and that was great for her when the boy was being too hyper. She noticed that her red-headed son had been much happier over the past few days. Despite his attempts to hide it from her, which was quite hypocritical if she said so herself, the boy had looked terribly lonely, and it broke her heart. Rouge knew he was hiding it from her because he didn't want to add more to her plate, and that warmed her heart, but she didn't believe in favoritism, and if her little boy was in need of some TLC, she would gladly give it to him. Most of the children on the island were a few years older than Rosan. They had tried to intimidate little Rosan, to show just who was in charge, but he had thought it was a game and promptly beat them all into submission after they got into a fight. Rouge honestly hadn't known Rosan liked fighting, but looking at the wild grin on his face as she cleaned his bruises told her everything she needed to know. The boy was definitely a fighter. She had been sure to lightly scold him, despite knowing he wasn't at fault, so that he could understand that you don't just beat people up for fun. Though, she was glad that he was willing to defend himself. A world like this would gladly pick on the defenseless. But now, the older kids, with their bruised egos, avoided him like the plague, and the few kids his age, wanting to fit in, soon followed suit. None of the kids wanted anything to do with him, and, though he didn't mind at all, claiming he was way too awesome for them, which Rouge agreed with, the effects of being lonely still slightly hurt the 4-year-old. Though there was that one girl, Shizuka. Rouge was sure she had a crush on Rosan, but the poor girl always got overwhelmed by her little boy's personality. His larger-than-life attitude and cheerful disposition was too much for the child to handle. Every time they met up, the boy would speak about anything and everything, to the point where she was reduced to generally not saying a word to him, just so she could comprehend it all. Worst of all, her silly Rosan just assumed that she didn't like him either, so he stopped trying to talk to her. He completely disregarded the fact that the girl said on multiple occasions that she wanted to marry him. Poor girl, Rouge idly thought. choosing to have feelings for her son of all people. Rosan was much smarter than he looked, but the boy was sorely lacking in social skills. Well, at least she didn't have to worry about him finding the wrong girl too early. Her child had been blessed with good genetics and was going to grow up to be a looker, and Rouge didn't want to have to fend off all his suitors. Like this, though, those poor people attracted to Rosan would be lucky to even get a glance from the boy. She had been getting ready to talk to him and make sure he was okay when he came home late that day in a better mood than she had seen in a long time. Her son had apologized profusely for being late, but despite that, he was smiling like he had won the lottery. The strawberry blonde was happy that whatever weight was on his shoulder had been lifted, and it made her rest easier knowing he was happy again. No doubt gaining an ability that he could focus his attention into was helping with that in spades. That had been a week ago, and since then, he had been going out far more frequently. Rouge had to admit, despite being pleased that he had ways to occupy himself now, she did feel a slight pang of loneliness at times. After Rosan had confronted his freckled mother, the two of them had begun to rely on each other far more. So him going out so frequently now stung a little bit. When it came to her, however, nothing could escape Rosan's perception. That morning he had taken one look at her, right as he was about to go outside again, and promptly dropped everything he was about to do to instead hang out with his super amazing mama. And that's how they ended up here, Rosan snuggling her under a warm blanket, reading a book as she hummed a tune and drank her coffee. Honestly, she was beginning to think it was impossible to hide anything from the 4-year-old. It was like he was able to tell how she felt at just a glance. It was a scary ability of his, and she was sure in the future, when he was older, it would be incredibly useful. The two enjoyed each other's company, inside their home, sitting on a couch under the blankets, just enjoying their respective presence. She absent-mindedly read the book with Rosan, something about dragons, as they both hid away from the cold weather. Though she didn't mind it as much as Rosan, he absolutely despised the cold. It still made her uncomfortable. Rosan looked so comfortable she doubted he had any intention of leaving his spot on her lap. Knowing him, he was probably going to fall asleep soon in her grasp, and she'd be cooing too hard at the adorable sight to move him. She felt a little guilty about keeping him inside, so she would try to convince him otherwise and let him have some fun outdoors. Rubbing a spot on his soft hair he especially liked, she struggled to contain her laughter as he melted into her touch, practically purring in delight. Rouge softly asked him, "Don't you want to go outside today, little Rose?" Without even looking up, Rosan replied, "Nope, I don't wanna. It's way too cold, Mama. Also, you were sad, so now I want to be with you." Rouge sighed at his simple and blunt declaration. There was no point in arguing with him. Short of forcing him to do it, which she would never do, Rosan would definitely not change his mind. Still, blushing lightly, the mother was flattered that Rosan enjoyed spending time with her so much. She nuzzled his hair to hide her blush and began tickling his belly, catching the child completely off guard. "Pfft, wait, Mama, stop. Wait. This ain't FAI." The boy was unable to finish, and he helplessly devolved into more laughter. Rosan tried desperately to fend off her assault, but Rouge was merciless. She would tickle him until she felt like he had enough for being so adorable. After what felt like eternity to the boy, but was actually just another minute, Rouge finally stopped. Rosan lay flat on the floor, completely defeated and out of breath. The boy's cheeks were flushed, matching his mother's in hue, and he had a massive pout on his face. Sitting up after a moment's struggle, Rosan mustered up the angriest glare he could possibly muster to direct towards his mother. He failed miserably, but that was besides the point. That was cruel, Mama. I didn't even do nothin', and why ya know how ticklish I am," Rosan angrily declared, puffing his cheek in indignation. Rouge had since stopped laughing and nearly melted at the sight. Composing herself, the mother said, in the most calm voice she could muster, "I'm sorry, little Rose, but I have a good reason for doing it." Rosan impatiently looked at her as she deliberately paused in her explanation. This had better be good or else she'd face his wrath. Deciding to stop teasing him, she said, "You're just too cute, my little Rose. I couldn't help it." Okay, so maybe she wasn't done teasing him yet. Could you blame her? It was really fun messing with her adorable son. Rosan stared at her in disbelief, mouth wide open and a deep blush painting his features. Rouge couldn't hold it in anymore and devolved into another fit of laughter. He had so much confidence yet, compliments still threw him for a loop. Rosan, having finally had enough of her teasing, let out a battle cry and tackled her. Though his assault was perfect and well executed, his mother was a formidable opponent. Rouge took it all in stride and hugged the redhead lightly against her frame. The strawberry blonde began rubbing the weak spot that was his soft hair, and all the fight was drained out of the devil fruit user as he instantly melted in her grasp. The redhead sighed in bliss at the feeling. Yes, his mother was formidable indeed. He would spare her for now. He would pointedly ignore how Rouge had not stopped laughing the entire time. Rosan was practically buzzing with excitement. He had been waiting for this day since Madchan had told him about it, and it was finally here. Dusk was swiftly approaching and Rosan idly shivered. The steady summer breeze that normally accompanied the island had been replaced with a chilly wind that he felt in his core. The trees that normally swayed heavily had come to a near standstill in wake of the new weather. Even the sun dimmed down, temporarily conceding to nature. Despite how much Rosan hated the cold, he marveled at how incredible nature was. An unyielding, unstoppable, overwhelming force that could never be stopped. He wanted to be like that. Rosan wanted to be as dominant as a force of nature. Then nothing would be able to stop him. He'd be like a hurricane and sweep everything up. The redhead was sat cross-legged in the same clearing he always inhabited. Instead of his standard tee and shorts combo, Rosan had decided to dress appropriately for the weather. For his top half, he was adorned in a comfy purple hoodie that reached slightly below his waist, and in the middle was a red star. His lower half was just as simple, sporting snug black sweatpants. The cuff of the pants were tucked neatly into some snug black boots. To wrap it up, both his hands were covered in protective gloves. Yes, Rosan was the picture-perfect definition of prepared. Mama had made sure of it. So that begged the question, why was he still so freaking cold? As that thought passed through his head, a breeze brushed into his already rosy cheeks, causing him to let out a squeak of surprise. Rosan grumbled embarrassingly at the noise he let out and knew Mama would have laughed at him if she heard it. Cammy, he hated the cold so much. Suddenly an idea popped into his head.
Mushen,
Can you make me feel not so sucky against the cold? After a moment, the voice he was growing comfortably familiar with spoke up and told him, yes, I can regulate your body temperature to suit your needs, depending on the weather. Would you like me to apply it? Nodding rapidly, Rosan exclaimed, That's amazing. Madchan, you're so awesome. He marveled as the chill of the cold suddenly stopped bothering him. The breeze was still there, but where before he could barely handle it, now it felt totally normal. That was so cool. Maud blushed at his compliments and tried to change the subject due to the embarrassment she currently felt. Thank you, Rosan, but don't we have another thing to discuss? She asked knowingly. Rosan's eyes widened as realization hit him and a large grin split his face. The mindscape. It's ready, right? He asked excitedly. The boy was positively brimming with energy, and Maud couldn't help but match it with a smile on her face. Maud confirmed that it was in fact ready, and Rosan cheered in joy, practically bouncing around the clearing in his happiness. Yes, I get to finally see how you look, Madchan. I'm so excited. I waited an entire week for this and now it's time.
Smoo.
I want to go right now, Madchan. Maud definitely understood how people could feel overwhelmed by Rosan. When he got going, it was incredibly hard to get him to stop. Clearing her throat to get his attention, the redhead stopped chattering and listened intently to what she had to say. Smiling that he respected her enough to stop instantly, Maud said, Because mindscapes are normally impossible to achieve, it may be a bit difficult to enter yours. But don't be discouraged. You will be able to do it in time. Nodding in understanding, Rosan grinned and said, Don't worry, Madchan. I won't get sad. So, how do you do it? Close your eyes and focus. Look for where you feel the deepest concentration of my ability. It's not easy to locate, but once you find it, take grasp of it and imagine yourself next to me. Wow, Madchan, is that you? A voice cut her off, making her eyes widen in disbelief. You're so pretty. Rosan gushed as he took in her appearance. After a moment, he glanced around in wonder and said, "This place is so awesome too." Maud couldn't help but open her mouth in shock as she looked down at the grinning boy. But how? It wasn't incredibly difficult to enter the mindscape, but still, it wasn't something a person simply got on their first try. Yet here was the tiny little boy, purple gaze with tiny pupils shining, as he drank up her appearance. Was he really that impressed with how she looked? As if reading her thoughts, Rosan nodded rapidly. "Yeah, Maud-chan, you look incredible," he confirmed as he beamed up at her in awe. Unable to hide it, Maud flushed in embarrassment. She looked down at herself. The devil fruit wasn't sure if Rosan would have liked it, but it seemed like she was worried for nothing. Maud stood at a modest height of 5 feet 8 inches, 172 centimeters. She had taken a page out of Rosan's book, and her skin was a bronze hue, just a shade lighter than his. Framing her heart-shaped face was a drape of purple hair similar shade to Rosan's eyes. It was styled into a Heim cut that reached to just above her rear. She was fitted in a long, dominantly black with slight amounts of white on it, dress that reached all the way to her shoeless feet. Most notably, however, were her eyes. 2 blood-red orbs, lacking pupils, shined, as they directed their widened gaze to the boy who was at least 2 feet shorter than her. Rosan, finally snapping out of his reverie, practically launched himself at her. She was shocked when he crashed into her, but his light weight meant she didn't stumble. Her apprehension was quickly wiped away as tiny little arms wrapped around her slim waist. "I'm so happy to finally meet you, Maud-chan. You're so pretty, you know? Your hair, it's so beautiful, and your eyes are so bright, just like mine. Now that I know how to get to you, I'm gonna visit you so much now. Ha ha ha. We can have sleepovers now. Wait, weren't we kinda having them already? Well, we can have even more." Rosan cackled, speaking a mile a minute in his excitement. In hindsight, it was only a matter of time before Rosan's entire character broke her. Having it happen now, instead of later, was probably a relief because this boy was very clearly insane. Despite the revelation on Rosan's mental state, however, Maud hesitantly wrapped her arms around his tiny frame and flashed him the first smile she had ever done in this new body. Rosan happily flashed her his signature grin, as he radiated an overwhelming amount of warmth and joy. Maud was beginning to understand how Rouge felt. Despite the fact that this boy would very well be the death of her, the purple-haired woman wanted nothing more than to protect him. Finally satisfied, Rosan let her go and plopped himself down and began to observe his surroundings. "So this is my mindscape, eh? Wow, this is exactly what I would want. Good job, me," the 4-year-old said, praising himself with a pat on his back. Maud deadpanned at how shameless Rosan was, but she had to agree that it fit him well. Rosan's mindscape had taken the form of a seemingly endless tropical forest. Trees reached high into the sky and were densely packed together. Not even the sun could pierce the green foliage. The grass was cut low enough where even someone as tiny as the redhead would not be bothered by it. The only noise, besides the 2 of them, were the leaves rustling against the gentle breeze. In an area where not as many trees lay, a large hot pink house was stationed. It looked to be a 2-story building, and just from the outside, he could tell it was barren and empty except for the bare necessities. No matter, Rosan would change that soon enough. But that was for another time. Maud finally managed to compose herself enough to speak. "Hello, it's nice to officially meet you," she began, and Rosan's eyes began shining in excitement. He could hear her in person now. It felt so weird to hear her soothing, neutral voice in person and not as a voice in his head. "Like this, I can formally introduce myself. I am Modification, the devil fruit known as the Mod no Mi, and the partner of Portgasty, Rosan, and it is my goal to ensure he achieves whatever it is he desires." She smiled down at Rosan as she concluded what she was saying. Rosan understood quickly what she wanted and immediately followed her lead. "Nice to meet you, Maud-chan.
Imporgas de Rosan.
I want to become the strongest in the world so that no one messes with the ones I love. I hope Maud-chan can be my partner before, when, and after I become the best." Rosan beamed as he held out his hand expectantly. Maud held out her hand as all apprehension was wiped from her form. No matter what, she would put her entire being into supporting Rosan. That she was sure of. It was the least she could do. As they grasped each other in a firm but friendly handshake that quickly morphed into a hug, a deeper connection formed between boy and fruit. A pair of red eyes, hidden from view, watched them the entire time. While in the mindscape, Maud had taken the opportunity to explain basic things about her fruit usage and how he could use it. The 4-year-old was surprisingly intelligent and was quick on the uptake of things, though at the end of it, the boy decided to give her freedom to change what she deemed fit. She just had to discuss it with him, and all would be fine. The trust he had in her, to give her such freedom, was touching, but she needed to make sure Rosan was not this trusting to everyone he saw. Rosan didn't notice how late it had gotten. The sun had long gone, and he was sure if he went into town, there would not be a single person in sight. Panicking at the time, Rosan hastily got up. "Oh no, Maud-chan, it's so late. I have to get home before Mama kills me." The little boy quickly got up and began his quick journey home. Oh man, he had so much explaining to do. Rosan sent a quick prayer hoping that Rouge was feeling merciful at the moment. Mama wasn't home. Rosan had rushed home in record time in order to tell his mother what happened and hoping that his excuses would hold up with the freckled woman. The redhead quickly unlocked the door and burst into their house. Apologies already on the cusp of his lips. Said apologies died in his throat when he realized his mother wasn't sitting in her rocking chair waiting for him. The child was briefly confused before guilt overtook him. She must have gotten tired, waiting so long for him, and had gone to sleep in her room. Dang it, he was being a bad son by ignoring his mother's well-being and flooding her with unnecessary stress. Rosan quickly, but quietly made his way to her room to check up on her. It was too dark to navigate, but Rosan refused to open the lights. If she was sleeping, then he wouldn't want to disturb her. Right on cue, everything became visible and Rosan sent a mental thanks up to Maud-chan. "Think nothing of it," was all she said. With that, Rosan continued, now unimpeded by the dark, to his mama's room. He finally made it to her room and slowly cracked the door open an inch just to confirm his suspicions that she was sleeping. He just wanted to see her. The boy didn't want to wake her up, so he'd check up on her and go to sleep himself. There was nobody there. Now Rosan was getting worried. "Maud-chan, did something happen to Mama?" He gasped as he asked, "Did someone take her?" Maud quickly soothed Rosan's worries before he could delve into those what-ifs. "That is unlikely. There are no signs of a break-in." She had been observing their surroundings the entire time due to knowing that there was no way Rouge would go to sleep without knowing of Rosan's whereabouts. "Furthermore, I noticed that one of the coats on the hanger have gone missing. The most possible outcome is that your mother left on her own accord." As Rosan absorbed the new information, a light bulb went off in his head. Slamming a fist against his palm, Rosan exclaimed, "She's at the hospital." Maud was impressed at how quickly he had deduced that. "Yes, that is most likely the explanation for why she is out so late." "Well done, Rosan." The boy beamed at her praise, feeling quite proud of himself. Rosan was excited. Mama being at the hospital could only mean one thing. The baby was on the way. Grinning in excitement, the redhead prepared to depart the house again. Rosan began sprinting towards the hospital as he quickly left his home. "Mama probably doesn't want me to be there," he whispered to himself. "Is there any way we can spy on her without getting caught?" the child asked his newest friend. Maud confirmed that there was a way, and Rosan grinned in excitement. He quickly made his way into the town with a spring in his step. It was incredibly late and extremely dark, but, thanks to Maud-chan, he could see just fine. Everyone had long since retreated into their homes, and Rosan should have been the only one out. Things were never quite that simple, though. "Rosan," Maud suddenly began urgently, "stop. You need to hide." Immediately, Rosan skid to a stop, confusion making its way onto his features as he heard what Maud-chan said. He complied, however, and quickly tucked his tiny frame into a nearby flower shop's display plant. Soon enough, the reason for Maud's concern revealed itself. A veritable giant, in comparison to Rosan, turned the corner. Tall, tanned, broad-chested, The muscular man surely struck intimidation into whatever he focused on. His hair and goatee were black, with sideburns beginning to whiten. He wore a dark double-breasted suit with a white shirt and a red tie. What stood out the most, however, were his shoulder pads. Whereas the normal were red and blue, this man's shoulder pads were black and red. A Marine, and an important one at that. Rosan's tiny pupils narrowed into slits as the man, who was holding a lantern, lumbered past him. He didn't dare make a sound as the man walked directly past the hidden child. Thankfully, the boy wasn't noticed, and Rosan allowed himself a breathe as the giant kept on walking, directly towards the hospital. Rosan's eyes widened in terror as the implications struck him. That incredibly strong Marine was walking to the hospital where his mother was at. The hospital where Marines had ruthlessly killed any pregnant woman's child. The hospital where his pregnant mother was currently at. The hospital where his pregnant mother was currently at. A foreboding feeling made its way into little Rosan's stomach. This couldn't be happening. The Marines, they had left weeks ago. They had finally given up. So why? Why was there such a strong one here now? Why was he here? Madchan, who is that? Why is he here? You recognize him, right? Rosan asked frantically, and it was true. Ma did recognize him. It was hard not to. But breaking this news to Rosan would be so hard. Rosan, that's Garp the Fist. He's a vice admiral, and he was bestowed the title Hero of the Marines. He's also known as the rival to the late Pirate King, Gold Roger. Maud told the 4-year-old softly. Rosan felt dizzy as he processed that information. This person, Garp, knew his father. Worst of all, they seemed to have history with each other. That man was his dad's rival? That man was his dad's rival, and he was walking towards the hospital. That man was his dad's rival, and he was walking towards the hospital. That foreboding feeling in Rosan's stomach solidified into pure dread. His mother was in danger. Rosan stamped down the urge to rush into action. He stood no chance against that man, and so he needed to act with caution. Madchan, I'd like to spy on that man, but from a distance, Rosan said, voice completely serious. Maud was impressed that the boy was able to understand the severity of the situation. There is a way. Give me a moment. I'll upload the directions to you directly. The devil fruit replied, sounding just as serious as him. It only took a moment before Rosan received said info. He lightly touched his head at the influx of information, but the moment soon passed. His eyes glowed with knowledge, and the redhead knew exactly what he needed to do now. Nodding determinedly, Rosan quickly looked for the object that he needed. Finding it quickly, Rosan picked up the tiny rock and clutched it tightly. With glowing purple eyes, the redhead said, "Modification, transform." Before his eyes, the boy watched in awe as the rock's form changed into that of a mechanical fly. It whirred a bit as it flew around before resting lightly on Rosan's palm. He wasn't finished, however. Modification, vision pair, user Rosan, he whispered. Rosan was heavily disoriented at suddenly being able to see through 2 point of views. Quickly shutting his own eyes, lest he give himself a headache, he temporarily shut down the robo-fly's vision so he could gather himself again. Finally, he opened his eyes again and stared at the fly in wonder. So I can just order this thing around and it will listen to me? Maud hummed in confirmation, and Rosan's eyes gleamed at the potential this ability had. I want you to follow that old man, okay? If you lose him, fly towards the hospital. I think that's where he's headed. It buzzed in affirmation and flew off without haste. As for Rosan, he sprinted back home. Making it in a record 5 minutes, he quickly went into his room and got comfortable. The child quickly went into his mindscape and rushed to Maud. She scooped him into a hug to ease his worries and noticed the redhead was trembling. That man. He's so strong, Madchan, Rosan said, and Maud looked at the trembling boy in sympathy. I never want to be that helpless again, Madchan. Never. I know, Rosan, the devil fruit said soothingly, and she gently rubbed his back in order to get him to calm down. We will become strong, I swear, she assured him. He buried himself deeper into her and murmured out, "The strongest." "The strongest," Maud repeated as they continued their embrace. For all his bravado, Rosan was still only 4 years old. It was moments like these where Maud was afraid of the target she had painted on his back. After a moment, Rosan disentangled himself from the hug and reactivated the vision on his bug. Due to being in his mindscape, the vision of his robo-bug had expanded into a television view so that they could both watch. Boy and Devil Fruit watched with bated breaths. Rouge had been laying down on the hospital bed before a commotion caught her attention. "Wait, sir, you can't go there," the voice of her doctor said, before being shoved away by a large hand. A large figure entered the room, and it only took her a moment to recognize him as Monkey D. Garp. Holding his lantern up, Garp asked, "Are you Portgas D. Rouge?" His deep voice came out as a question. Rouge nodded, and that was it. Garp walked over to a corner and stood there in complete silence. She looked at the man in slight concern, recognizing who it was, but it was too late to suddenly stop the process. Besides, Roger had nothing but respect for the man before her, and so she would trust him. Rouge knew it was finally time. The Marines had left and had shown no signs of coming back. She felt a sense of relief flood through her body. She would finally be giving birth after 20 long months. The pregnant woman had endured and endured, but finally, it would all be worth it. With that, Rouge closed her eyes and finally stopped resisting. The fly had finally made it into the room. To avoid detection, it had hid itself onto the roof. It silently observed what was currently transpiring. In Rouge's arms was a wailing infant. She cradled it gently, and a smile full of pure love made its way onto her face. "If it's a girl and if it's a boy, Ace." Those were the names we decided on, so, as of today, this baby's name is Gold Ace. Tears spilled from her eyes as she clutched the baby close to her, kissing him gently on the head. Garp silently watched the exchange. Slowly but surely, Rouge felt all the strength leaving her body. As she faded, the mother of two looked at Garp in worry and said, "I have one more. His name is Rosan. Please take him with you." She was quickly losing the power to speak.
Rouge.
"Stay with us, Rouge." The doctor spoke frantically, closing the distance to see if there was anything he could do. Garp could only stare in horror as the stress of holding a child for so long finally caught up to her. Everyone in the room came to the conclusion at the exact same time. Rouge was dying. "My little Rose, I'm so sorry, but it seems like I broke my promise. The three of us can't be together after all," Rouge whispered softly. "I hope you can forgive your mama for being such a liar again." "You never did like liars," the mother of two said. As she spoke, the tears fell down her cheeks even faster. "Please, Rosan, as his older brother, I hope you can take care of Ace and the both of you grow up into exceptional young men." Sobs racked her body, but even then, she continued, "You're a brilliant and kind young boy, Rosan, and I know under your guidance, Ace will grow into an amazing person too." Finally, the strength fully left her body. As she closed her eyes, a peaceful smile made its way onto Rouge's face. "I'm so sorry I won't be able to see you flourish, my little Rose." The woman apologized, and it sounded so sincere and heart-wrenching that the onlookers couldn't help but shed a few tears. "Never forget that Mama loves you." And with that, Portgas D. Rouge, mother of Joel D. Ace and Portgas D. Rosan, the woman who held a baby in her belly for 20 long months, through sheer willpower, died. Unheard to all, the fly crashed into the ground and shattered into pieces. Rosan's had been forcefully ejected from the mindscape from the shock of the situation. The little boy violently shot up, as the memory replayed in his head over and over and over again. No. That wasn't real. That couldn't be real. He was in his bed, so he had to have been dreaming. Right. That was it. That had to be it. None of what happened was real. He would go to his mother's room, and she would be just fine. Yes, he was sure of it. He would find her sleeping peacefully, still pregnant. Hastily, Rosan got up and rushed over to his mother's room. Though he knew what he would see deep down, the 4-year-old still deluded himself. Ma didn't have the heart to tell him. How could she? How could she tell the boy that what he saw was no dream? Rosan desperately burst into her room. "Mama, I'm sorry I was late. I was testing stuff out with Ma-chan." A deafening silence was the only thing that greeted him. Rosan refused to give up, though. Quickly, he ran to the dining area where his mother was normally at. Surely Rouge would be in her signature rocking chair, caressing her belly like always.
Mama.
I'm sorry for rushing you. You don't have to have the baby yet. I can wait. Please. IHH had a dream, and if YUH have him, YU might die. The silence was damning. Reality finally began to set in as Rosan realized that it wasn't a dream. He had watched his mother die. That had been very real. The stress of holding a child for so long had killed her. Rosan knew holding the baby for so long couldn't be good. That's why he begged her to have it as soon as possible. He knew this couldn't be healthy for her. Now, she was dead. She was dead, and he would never be able to see her again. Rosan didn't realize he had collapsed onto the ground. It hurt to breathe. The redhead felt his whole world shattering as everything came crashing down. She had promised him that they would be able to finally be together after everything was done. She promised him, so why? 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 Why did she lie to him? How could she lie to him? After everything they went through. Then it dawned on the hysterical boy. Ace. If it wasn't for Ace, Mama would still be here. Ace had caused his mother to die. His mother had died for Ace. If Ace had never been born, his mama would still be here. Ace had killed his mama. Ace had killed his mama. Ace had killed Rosan. A voice snapped him out of his spiral. That's enough. You need to snap out of it. Maud sounded incredibly worried for the boy having a mental breakdown. Rosan slapped himself as the magnitude of what he was thinking finally caught up to him. An overwhelming guilt filled him then and there, and the boy wanted to crawl into a hole and hide. Had he really put all the blame on his little brother? He was the worst of the worst. It would never be Ace's fault. How could it be? He hadn't asked to be born. Not even an hour old, and Rosan had already failed as an older brother. He didn't deserve his mother's praise. He didn't deserve anyone's praise. He was the worst brother ever. Ace would be better off without him. Wait, that was right. Ace would be better off without him.
Rosan's visage ardennait.
We need to leave, Machan. That Marine is coming after us, and if he figures out that I have you, it's game over for the both of us. Maud was worried. Rosan was currently bottling his emotions up. What about Ace? She asked tentatively. Surely Rosan wasn't going to leave his baby brother behind? Rosan bit his lip at the decision he was about to make. Ace has someone to watch over him. You don't, Machan. Besides, I don't deserve him. You heard what I was thinking. I'm awful. That's not true, Rosan. Maybe, but I need to make sure the Marines don't get their hands on you, Machan. Going right into one's hand, especially one like Garp, is a bad idea. So we need to leave the island on our own. I understand, Maud said, but she didn't sound happy at all. But, will you be okay? The worry in her tone was palpable, and Rosan flinched. His mask nearly cracked, but, very quickly, he had composed himself. He couldn't grieve, not yet. He needed to get off the island first. I'll be fine. We need to get out of here, though. Who knows when that man will show up? Rosan's voice was a near whisper as he spoke. Rosan quickly began gathering essentials: clothes, food, drinks, and his toys. The boy was like a whirlwind, gathering them as quickly as possible. After a moment, he had stuffed everything into one bag that he had modified to be bigger. Machan, is it possible to make this bag smaller? I want to put it in my pockets, he asked, and, after a moment, Maud gave him the instructions of what to do, and he held out his hand to touch the bag. After a short, modify, size, the formerly massive bag had been shrunken. Tucking it in his pocket, Rosan tried to think about how he could escape the island. He could try to steal a ship, but his little body wouldn't be able to get it ready quick enough. He didn't have the ability to fly either. Even if he did, he doubted he'd be able to fly long enough to reach another island. Rosan went back to his room as an idea suddenly formed in his head. Finding what he was looking for, Rosan held it up triumphantly. In his hands was a toy boat that was white and blue. Machan, do you think I can modify this into an actual boat? Maud blinked at his question. That wasn't a bad idea. No, in fact it was a great idea. She would most likely need to take over to ensure the boat was made perfectly, but the concept was brilliant. It's possible. I will need to take control if you don't mind. I need to make the boat sailable, she affirmed. Luckily, She already knew how to do that. Nodding in agreement, Rosan quickly tucked away the boat. He had to go now before Garp came after him. He was sure he had a lot more time, but he needed to widen the distance as much as possible between him and that monster of a man, or else he'd get caught. If that happened, the 4-year-old had no illusion of what would happen if they fought and he tried to escape. Rosan grabbed his bag and began to depart from his, now former, home. He would miss his home terribly, but there was no reason to stay here anymore. With that, Rosan took off into a sprint. As he burst through the door, a picture frame fell onto the floor. It would be years until Rosan ever saw this house again. For hours later, Garp had a bad feeling when he couldn't sense anyone in Port Gas Rouge's home. That feeling turned into trepidation as he realized the door was left ajar. Holding little Ace in one arm, Garp burst open the door. Nothing. There was nobody here. Glancing around, Garp didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. No signs of a struggle, and everything was left in place. Besides the fact that the door was left open, it would be hard to tell that there was anything wrong in the first place. But there was something wrong. There was no child here. Garp had known Roger had another kid. The Pirate King had said his oldest son was not his biological son, but that didn't matter to him. The man's final request was for him to take care of the both of them, and the Vice Admiral respected him enough to actually follow through with it. These kids didn't deserve to be punished for something their father did. The hero of the Marines couldn't really do that, though, because one of those kids was currently missing. Garp paused as he stepped on something. Bending down to see what it was, he noticed that it was a picture frame. The Marine held it up and he saw a redhead, Rosan. He presumed hugging Rouge as tight as possible. Rosan, so full of joy, had a wide grin on his face, and Rouge, while much more subdued, radiated an equal amount of happiness. Well, at least he knew what the child looked like. The kid looked fairly unique, so he shouldn't be too hard to find. Though that begged the question, what exactly happened here? For hours earlier, a dinghy sailed calmly through the night. It was inhabited by only one person. A little boy, no older than 4, sat there, as the events of the day finally caught up to him. After Rosan had departed, he quickly made his way to a body of water opposite of the Marine's ship. As he arrived, he removed the toy boat from his pocket and laid it on the floor. Rosan closed his eyes and let Madchan take control of his body. Rosan's eyes snapped open, irises glowing red instead of purple, to signify Maud taking over, and she bent down quickly to rest her tiny palms onto the boat. "Modify, form," she said, and in an instant, the toy boat had rapidly grown in size. It had taken the size of a dinghy, and the plastic had been modified into a buoyant material, capable of floating. She knew that Rosan would not be able to paddle with his frame, so she used modification to passively power it. That brought them to their current situation. The dinghy sailed steadily through the ocean as Rosan curled into himself. He had successfully escaped the island, but at what cost? Rosan's mask, that he struggled so hard to maintain, cracked. The stress of the entire day had finally reached him, and the poor 4-year-old could no longer hold it in. Tears spilled as painful sobs racked his tiny frame. "Mama, why? Why did you leave me?" He couldn't explain it right now. The boy felt so lost. "What am I supposed to do now, Mama? I miss you," the boy said miserably, as he hiccuped repeatedly. In a matter of moments, he felt himself dragged into his mindscape where Madchan had already been waiting for him. Wordlessly, she scooped the boy into a tight, reassuring hug, and Rosan fully broke down. He babbled incoherently as his body shuddered from pure grief. Why had it all gone wrong? All he wanted was to be with his Mama A, and now she was Gigi gone. The boy sobbed even harder. Maud felt a terrible guilt fill her. She caused this. It was her fault that Rosan had so willingly separated himself from his brother. He had done it so that the Marines could not get access to her again. Also, he could protect her when no one else would. The devil fruit felt tears welling in her eyes at the pure agony Rosan was currently in. Still, Maud refused to make a noise. The devil fruit would be here for him in his hard times. She was all he had left, and she would never fail him. Even if Rosan had lost faith in the world, she would make sure to be a steady source of trust for this boy. That was a promise. The anguished sobs of "I suddenly orphaned. Boy rang through the night and Rosan wailed his pain to the world. Wah! He cried and cried.
Charakter shet, modification, mod nomi.
Type: Paramecia. Summary: a mysterious devil fruit that is highly prized by anyone that happens to know of its existence. Not much is known about this fruit except for that fact that it's highly guarded by the Marines. Curiously, she seems to be the only fully sentient devil fruit. Currently wielded by Portgas D. Rosan. Appearance: tan skin, slightly lighter than Rosan's. Her appearance is heavily inspired by Rosan. Height: 5 feet 8 inches. Hair: long purple hair styled into a Heim cut. Eyes: red pupil-less eyes that glow in the dark. Outfit: long black dress with slight amounts of white on the sleeves and stomach area. She is usually seen barefoot. Her nails are painted a mixture of purple and red due to those being Rosan's favorite color. Likes: Rosan. Dislikes: unknown. Author's note: I like to think this chapter was pretty unpredictable. Hope you enjoyed it. It was a lot more words this time around in comparison to chapter 1. I tend to write a lot of words, so I hope you're into that.